Have you ever woken up with a strange sense of emptiness, as if a part of your soul was slowly fading away? Looking back at the years gone by, you see yourself having exhausted all your strength to sacrifice and nurture those you love. Now, as the shadows of twilight begin to fall, a silent question echoes. After all I have given, what is left for me in the end? Human life is inherently fragile, like the morning mist upon the river, vanishing the moment the first rays of sunlight touch it. For decades, you poured your entire heart into family, career, and relationships, always prioritizing the needs of others while forgetting yourself. Then, standing on the other side of life's slope, you suddenly realize you are exhausted and wonder, who will be the one to compensate me? The Buddha taught that attachment to craving is the root of suffering. We often mistakenly believe that love and kindness will always be returned fairly. But this world still operates in its own way. Your children and grandchildren are busy with their own battles. If you keep wandering in search of external recognition, you will only receive weariness and bitterness. The most authentic answer is to return to yourself. This is not selfishness, but an awakening to protect the precious peace remaining in your life. In the journey of human life, we often carry a fierce belief that love, kindness, and sacrifice will always be repaid with an equivalent value. We give with open hearts, secretly hoping that the good seeds we sow will create a cycle of gratitude. However, as time passes, a harsh truth gradually emerges. Our most sincere efforts are not always reflected back. This is the essence of impermanence, or anicca in the teachings of the Buddha. Everything in this world is constantly changing, from relationships and people to life circumstances. What were once the deepest bonds can gradually become distant and cold over the years. Imagine the image of a father who was once the sturdy pillar of his family. In his youth, he worked tirelessly day and night, sacrificing every personal pleasure to ensure his children had the brightest future. He gave with all his silent love, under the naive assumption that when he grew old and weak, his children would be his sanctuary. But reality turned out quite differently. As he entered his twilight years, phone calls became sparse. Warm family meals became distant memories, replaced by hurried inquiries and promises of visits that never materialized. Sitting by the window watching the world move, he realized with a shock that love given does not always return in the way one expects. This misconception about the law of reciprocity is deeply rooted in our minds. We write silent contracts in our heads that loyalty will be exchanged for attachment, and kindness will harvest attention. Yet the river of life never flows according to a fixed rule. It carves its own path, often drifting far from the harbors we once hoped for. The expectation that others must respond exactly as we have given is, in fact, an invisible shackle that we tie around our own necks. Similarly is the story of Mrs. Once, May, a woman who spent her whole life as the backbone of her family. From a young age, she cared for her siblings, later devoted herself to her husband, and then poured her whole soul into raising her children. She was always the one to heal every rift, an endless source of warmth whenever relatives faced misfortune. But when old age arrived, she found herself lonely in the house that once echoed with laughter. Her children are now grown, swept up in their own gears of career and personal ambitions. Her calls are met with brief replies. "I am very busy. I will come back another time." Initially, her heart broke. She blamed herself for what she might have done wrong for her love to vanish into the void. But through days and months of quiet reflection, she suddenly understood a great truth. Attachment to expectation is the root of all suffering. Love exists, but it does not follow the laws of fairness set by humans. She had given out of pure compassion, and that act of giving was already a complete reward. Her peace did not need to come from being repaid, but from the gratitude that she had loved wholeheartedly without conditions. The Buddha's teachings say that suffering arises when we try to hold on to things that do not belong to us, from people and results to illusions of perfection. The moment we loosen the hand that is trying to grip tightly, we will find freedom. Love should be like cool water, allowed to flow naturally. When we try to force it into a mold of expectation, it becomes stagnant, turning into resentment and bitterness. True generosity is generosity that comes without any strings attached. Understanding this truth brings a massive liberation. Instead of agonizing over what we did not receive back, we can shift our consciousness inward. Give because it is your virtuous nature, not to buy attention in the future. When life changes direction, when loved ones drift away, or when kindness is not appreciated, face it with acceptance instead of pain. This does not mean we choose to live in isolation or reject affection, but rather to find a balance between cherishing what we have and peacefully letting go of what is lost. Each soul has a unique journey to travel. Some will stay with us, some will only walk a part of the way, and that is the natural order of creation. Let love be as gentle as the wind, felt but not possessed. Let kindness spread like sunlight, warming all things without ever demanding repayment. And above all, let peace reign in your mind, stemming from the profound wisdom that simply being able to give is already the most wonderful grace of life. Old age is not the time for us to exhaustively chase after others or beg for a belated recognition. This is precisely the sacred moment for you to reclaim what you have so generously given away for so long: your energy, your peace, and your self-respect. For decades, you may have poured your entire heart into relationships, duties, and heavy responsibilities on your shoulders, hoping that the love and attention you invested would return. But now, as the twilight shadows of life begin to fall, a profound truth emerges. If you do not reclaim that energy yourself, no one else will do it for you. This absolutely does not mean you must close the door of your heart or hide from the world to live in isolation. On the contrary, it carries a much more powerful and positive meaning: self-prioritization. This means recognizing that your happiness and well-being are not secondary matters, but the core foundation of a life well lived. Instead of being preoccupied with seeking applause or attention from those who are already too busy with their own lives, return to reflect within. Ask yourself, what truly brings me joy? What dreams have I forgotten? What is still possible in this next chapter of life? The answers might surprise you. Perhaps you once longed to learn to paint, but the currents of life left your brushes covered in dust. Maybe you always wanted to travel but kept postponing it to prioritize others. Or sometimes it is simply something very humble, sitting quietly on the porch with a warm cup of tea, listening to the rustle of falling leaves, and allowing yourself to exist without carrying any expectations. Walking in nature, rereading old books, or practicing mindfulness are not luxuries, but the bridge that helps you find your true self again. Listen to the story of Mr. Kwong, a retired teacher who spent 40 years of his life molding the souls of many generations of students. He gave everything: knowledge, patience, and his heart. He worked late into the night to grade papers, stayed after school to tutor struggling children, and even sacrificed his precious personal time to help others succeed. He once assumed that when old age came, his students and colleagues would surround him to care for him just as he had done for them. But life just went on. His former students were busy building careers. His children had their own families, and the school where he once belonged had replaced him with a younger teacher. That reality threw a bucket of cold water on Mr. Huang's heart. He realized he had spent too much time living for others, that he forgot to live for himself. One day, at the suggestion of a friend, he decided to pick up the violin again, a childhood passion he had abandoned. At first, he hesitated with the thought that he was too old to start over. The first few weeks were discouraging as his hands were stiff and the violin felt so foreign. But gradually, The music began to flow. It was not perfect, but it was beautiful in its own unique way. He felt a sense of satisfaction that he had not seen in a long time, a joy that belonged entirely to him alone. Playing the violin did not aim to serve anyone. It simply brought happiness to himself. In that melody, he found himself again. In Buddhism, we have the concept of samadhi, also known as concentration. This is a state of deep focus and absolute inner stillness. When you reclaim your energy, you are actually practicing the most profound form of self-care. This is not self-indulgence, nor is it selfishness, but rather wisdom. It is the realization that your mental health is just as important as the well-being of those you once cared for. Imagine a candle that has burned almost to its wick, a flickering light weakened after years of illuminating others. If that candle does not take time to add more wax and protect its flame, what light remains to guide its own way? Your energy, peace, and sense of self are not things to be given away without limit. They need to be nurtured, protected, and restored. It is never too late to take back what belongs to you, to enjoy the quiet joy of privacy, to immerse yourself in creative goals, and to let go of the need for recognition from others. The most important thing is to realize that this life, this moment, is still yours to shape. Therefore, take a deep breath, step forward, and reclaim what has always belonged to you, your energy, your peace, and the right to live fully, without the need for apologies or regrets. Silence is often deeply misunderstood in modern society. When young, we often feel an instinctive urge to speak up, to explain ourselves, to defend our choices, or to argue to prove our personal worth. We try to raise our voices in the hope of being heard, believing that words can shape reality. However, as age advances, an obvious truth gradually emerges. Most people do not listen to understand. They only listen for an opportunity to reply. Conversations unintentionally become battlegrounds where words are used as weapons, and in the end, rarely does anyone truly win. In Buddhist teachings, speech must be considered and carry a wholesome meaning. Right speech, or samavaka, is one of the 8 branches of the Eightfold Path leading to liberation. This does not mean we must remain silent at all times, but rather to select our words wisely. We should only speak when truly necessary, when words serve the truth and kindness, and if that cannot be achieved, silence is the wisest path of all. Reflect on the story of an old Zen master who was once a renowned scholar. He had spent decades debating philosophical concepts, engaging in countless discussions that he then considered vital. One day, he met an arrogant young student who came to challenge him. The young man spoke incessantly, trying to use sharp arguments to prove that the old master's knowledge was outdated. The Zen master simply listened in silence, occasionally nodding slightly without ever interrupting. When the young man finished his discourse, the master only smiled gently and said, "Thank you for sharing your thoughts," then calmly walked away. The young man was stunned because he had expected a fiery rebuttal, a confirmation of his effort, but the master gave him no foothold for confrontation. Over time, it was that young person who realized the lesson from that silence. Not every battle needs to be joined, and the greatest wisdom sometimes lies in knowing how to let go of being right or wrong. This image is also similar to an elderly man arguing with a younger colleague, trying to assert that his experience deserves respect. The young person, wanting to affirm themselves, dismissed all those opinions and claimed that times had changed. The elder could choose to argue to the end, but instead, he chose to smile and leave, carrying his wealth of wisdom within without needing any external recognition. That is the power of stillness. In a world full of noise from phone notifications, conflicting opinions, and quarrels, choosing tranquility requires extraordinary courage. The modern mind is always driven to react, to respond, and to be heard at all costs. However, silence is a discipline, a skill, and above all, a form of wisdom. It is the ability to listen without rushing to judgment, to observe without needing to correct, and to let others hold their views without demanding consensus. There is an old saying in Zen, "Do not speak unless your words are more valuable than silence." How many words uttered in anger or pride have truly improved a situation? We often regret what we said in haste more than what we kept in our hearts. Consider the situation between a mother and daughter locked in a spiral of conflict. The daughter, with all her youthful passion and impulsiveness, accused her mother of being controlling and too conservative. Although the mother felt deeply hurt, instead of talking back, she chose to listen. She let her daughter speak all her pent-up frustrations, letting negative emotions flow until they were exhausted. When everything had quieted down, the mother took a deep breath and said, "I have heard what you said." That moment of acknowledgement in silence carried more weight than any lengthy defense. Silence accompanied by presence brings a value that words cannot fully express. This does not imply that silence is always the answer to every problem. There are times when we must speak up for justice, for truth, and to protect what is right. However, the difference lies in the intention. Are your words spoken from the ego, from a need to win, or are they issued from wisdom and a clear purpose? A wise person knows exactly when to speak and when to keep themselves in stillness. They know that silence is not weakness, but a mastery over one's own impulses. It means recognizing that there are conversations not worth consuming energy. There are arguments that no one ever wins, and the peace gained from walking away is worth much more than the momentary satisfaction of proving oneself right. Next time, when you feel the urge to defend yourself, to argue, or to prove your worth through words, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, is this truly necessary? Will my words bring clarity or only create more noise? If the answer is not clear, choose silence. Let your wisdom speak for itself through your way of life. Because in the end, true power does not belong to the loudest voice, but to the one who knows how to maintain composure, to only speak when it truly brings value to the world. Inside each of us, there always exists an intense longing to fix, to guide, and to step in to shield others from the mistakes we once tasted ourselves. This desire often stems from love and precious experiences traded for the many ups and downs of life. We worry when we see our children making decisions that we know for sure will lead to disappointment, or feel heartbroken witnessing a close friend sink deep into self-destructive habits. In those moments, instinct tells us to intervene immediately to save them, to grant them our wisdom to help them avoid unnecessary pain. But reality often unfolds quite differently. Wisdom, when bestowed unexpectedly, is rarely cherished. Most people must walk their own paths, stumble over the stones in their way, and only truly learn the lesson through their own practical experiences. Even the Buddha, when faced with the quarrels of others, often chose silence. This did not come from indifference or apathy, but from a profound understanding of the nature of suffering. Pain is a teacher, and struggle is a sculptor persistently carving away the stones of ignorance and illusion, thereby molding a resilient soul through every adversity. If we intervene too soon, if we rob someone of their lesson by carrying the burden for them, we are unintentionally depriving them of the opportunity to grow. Just like a caterpillar must struggle to emerge from its cramped cocoon to make its wings stronger. If someone tears the cocoon to help it too early, that butterfly will never be able to fly. Let us reflect on the story of Anand, a devoted son who had to witness his father squander the entire family fortune on gambling. Night after night, Anand pleaded with his father to stop, using the most logical arguments, expressing utter agony, and even seeking help from relatives. However, the father remained completely unmoved. No words or threats could change his behavior. Faced with this stalemate, Anand made an extremely difficult decision. He chose to let go. Instead of continuing to try and control his father's life, he shifted his focus to himself. Anand worked harder, built a stable future for himself, and refused to let his father's wrong choices dictate the peace in his soul. Until one day, when the father hit the rock bottom of failure, he sought out Anand, not for money, but for understanding. Only when faced with the full weight of his own mistakes was he truly ready to listen and change. This is the core of letting go, or equanimity in Buddhism. Letting go is not abandonment or neglect, but trust. It is the belief that the universe always operates according to its own process, and each person must experience personal lessons at their own pace. The fact that we see a storm approaching does not mean we must pull everyone inside. Sometimes they need to stand in the cold rain to understand why shelter is so important. Equanimity does not mean coldness or apathy, but the ability to love without possession, to care without trying to control. It means we focus on what is within our reach, our own peace, actions, and reactions. Imagine you are cradling a small bird in the palm of your hand. If you squeeze too tightly for fear it will fly away, you will hurt it. But if you keep your hand open, the bird can choose to stay or fly away, and whatever the result, the bird is free, and so are you. Follow the way of the old fisherman living by the river. Day after day, he observed young men struggling with the swift current to swim to the other side, despite the dangers. Many times he wanted to call out loudly to warn them, to show them a safer path further downstream. But he knew that the most precious lessons can only be learned directly through blood and sweat. Therefore, he chose to observe in silence. Over time, those young people either found the strength to swim more skillfully or learned to respect the power of the water. Had he intervened, they might never have developed that inner wisdom. Not everything in this world needs our interference, and not every battle belongs to your responsibility. There is a subtle art in knowing how to step back, to let life happen in its own way without constant molding from human hands. True wisdom lies in knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to help and when to stand aside. So, next time you feel an urge to fix or change someone, pause and ask yourself, am I doing this for them or because I feel insecure about the challenges they face? If the answer is your own insecurity, choose to let go. Focus on your own journey and protect your personal energy. After all, the only person you truly have the power to change is yourself. One of the deepest roots of all suffering in human life is the burning need for approval from others. From early childhood, we are educated to seek external validation. We long for praise when achieving success, for acceptance by friends, and for love from family through predetermined standards. This craving seeps into every corner of life, from the way we dress and the career paths we choose to the relationships we commit to. Humans often spend decades molding their actions based on how the world perceives them. They fear rejection, yearn for appreciation, and exhaustively wait for a nod from society. However, as time passes and the final years of life arrive, a vital question arises. Why do I still have to try to prove myself to this world? Listen to the story of Mrs. Douglas, Lila, a woman who spent almost her entire life just seeking the satisfaction of others. As a little girl, she was an obedient child, always striving to make her parents proud. When she became a wife, she sacrificed all her own dreams to be a solid support for her husband. As a mother, she placed the needs of her children above her own breath. But as she turned 60, standing in the silence of a house void of people, she suddenly realized a shocking truth. She had never truly lived for herself. Every decision, every sacrifice was made with the sole goal of receiving approval from others. Standing before the mirror, she asked herself, who am I truly when no one is watching? The reality is, no amount of external validation can bring eternal peace if the soul within remains empty. The Buddha taught that true happiness arises not from being understood by others, but from understanding oneself. Imagine a traveler bending their back under a heavy sack filled with the opinions and expectations of the world. Each step they take is weighed down by what society thinks, what family wants, and what friends expect. But what would happen if they set that sack down even for a moment? The relief, the serenity, and a sudden realization that this journey could be so much easier. That is the freedom that comes from letting go of the need for approval. Letting go does not mean becoming indifferent or isolating oneself, but rather redefining the source of one's own value. It is the shift from seeking external glory to lighting the inner lamp. Look at the life of Ahmed, a successful businessman who once spent his youth pursuing recognition. He built an empire, accumulated wealth, and climbed every ladder that society considers a symbol of admiration. However, behind that halo, Ahmed always felt an unfillable hollowness. There was always a new contract to sign, a new standard to reach, and someone new to impress. Only when he decided to leave his peak career to move to a small village and live a simple life did he feel true freedom for the first time. He woke up with the sun, worked with his own hands, and found joy in the smallest things. When a former colleague asked if he missed the old glory, he simply smiled and replied, "I have nothing left to prove, and that is the greatest achievement of my life." The need for approval is essentially just an illusion, a mist that keeps us running after things that can never fully satisfy us. The applause of the world is fleeting and depends entirely on their volatile moods. Conversely, self-acceptance is the solid foundation that nothing can shake. Think of the great masters, the monks hiding in deep forests, or the sages living on high mountains. They do not care about the applause or admiration of anyone. They do not measure their self-worth by external titles because they have found the most precious treasure, the autonomy within their own souls. Casting off the burden of expectation is not a process that happens overnight. It requires persistent practice, patience, and deep introspection. It requires the courage to say boldly, "I am enough," even when the world around is still constantly demanding more. It means you choose to stand firm in your own truth, even if it goes against the expectations of the crowd. That is the art of choosing authenticity over acceptance, choosing peace over tireless performances. Ask yourself, what would my life be like if I stopped seeking validation from others? What choices would I make if I truly did not care about the eyes of the world? Start walking in that direction, because after all, the only approval you truly need is the approval from your own heart. The noblest act of self-respect is recognizing that taking care of yourself is not a luxury, but a vital necessity. For too long, we have been programmed to believe that prioritizing ourselves is selfish, and choosing peace means turning our backs on the world. However, there is an obvious truth that you cannot pour water from an empty pitcher. Your body, mind, and soul all need to be nurtured, just as a tree needs water, light, and space to grow. Stop and reflect for a moment. When was the last time you truly connected with yourself? Not just a physical checkup, but a deep listening to your inner emotions, mind, and soul. How long has it been since you sat in silence to listen to the voices of hidden desires and truths? Life, with its harsh duties and expectations, often sweeps us away. But at this very moment, you are being called to return to your own harbor. As you step into the next chapters of your life, keep this in mind. You owe no one an explanation for choosing peace. You do not need anyone's permission to place yourself at the top of your priority list. Happiness is not something bestowed by others, but something you must claim and hold for yourself. Let resentments fade. Let go of all expectations and allow yourself the freedom to step into your own presence. You have spent a lifetime sacrificing and molding yourself to fit the needs of the world, but now, this new chapter belongs entirely to you. This is the time to nourish tranquility, cultivate joy, and enjoy the deep sense of fulfillment in simply being yourself. There is a quiet power in choosing yourself, not out of defiance, but out of love. It is love for the person you have become, for the arduous journey you have courageously walked through, and for the life that still awaits you ahead in the way you desire. The river of life always flows forward, and so do you. Move with the ease of someone who knows that peace is not found outside, but is created from deep within. Take a deep breath and feel the weight lifting from your shoulders. Step into the next chapter with grace, a clear purpose, and unshakable self-esteem. Remember that your happiness is not a subject for debate. It is something you own, you create, and you cherish. If this message has brought you some relief, join us as we continue the journey of seeking wisdom and peace. We will walk together on the path to a fulfilling life, where you can finally confidently choose yourself without regret. Take good care of yourself, because you truly deserve it.